A good deal of software is about data. And when we're talking about data, we're often storing it in databases. So in Node, in dealing with JavaScript, how exactly do we deal with databases? That's this next section. And to start with, we'll start with a conceptual aside. Relational databases in SQL. Now, this course isn't about relational databases or SQL, but just to make sure we're on the same page and to think about how this has to interact with JavaScript, let's talk about this for just a second. When we're talking about relational data and databases, typically we're talking about something like this: a table that has fields, or that is to say columns, and rows of data. So in this people table, each person has an ID, a first name, a last name, and an address. But in properly formatted relational databases, we try not to just stuff everything into one table, especially when we're repeating ourselves. So for example, we might have a table of people and a table of addresses, and we connect with some kind of ID. So we say this address belongs to this person based on the ID. But even better, we can make sure we don't repeat ourselves by continuing to split the information up as much as possible. So I might have an addresses table where we see that a person has a particular address, so we use the ID of the address and the ID of the person, and we can also tell this way that two people live in the same house. So this is what's called well-normalized data. That is basically to say data that doesn't repeat itself unnecessarily. We minimize how much space we're taking up in the database, and we structure our data in a way that makes it easy to ask interesting questions. And the asking questions part is done in SQL, structured query language, where we ask a question of the database and it can combine those tables and get a result. So this example query here took those last three tables and actually got back the result that was our original not so good table. But this is the way we generally want to get our data back. Now here's the question. If this is my data, how do I deal with it in JavaScript? Well, JavaScript has a way of storing data. It's called objects. And so we can think of a table as an array. And then each item in the array is an object. Each field represents a name, and the value in the row for that field, the value, on the name-value pair. So here is this table represented as a JavaScript object. An array, see the outer brackets, and then between each set of curly braces an object with a comma in between, and we see that we have two objects in this array that match this data. Make sense? So this is how we can deal with what's called tabular data, that is to say data in the table, when we actually get it and deal with it in JavaScript. So we just need something that is able to connect to the database and convert the tabular data into JavaScript objects. And we can find that on the NPM registry.